They didn't just kill her, they tried to delete her existence from the memory of the human race. For 30 centuries, a phantom king ruled the Nile, hiding a secret that was nearly erased by a chisel and a grudge. Walk through the Valley of the Kings today, and you will see the scars of a historical execution where names were hacked from granite and faces were ground into dust. This wasn't the work of grave robbers or foreign invaders. It was a cold, calculated attempt by a successor to rewrite reality itself. Somewhere beneath the shifting sands of Egypt lies the truth of a woman who broke the ultimate taboo, seized the throne of the gods, and paid for it with her eternal identity. The story begins in the heart of the 18th Dynasty, a time of golden expansion and rigid, unyielding tradition. The pharaoh was not just a man, he was a living god, a bridge between the heavens and the earth. To be a pharaoh was to be the embodiment of Horus, the hawk-headed deity of kingship. Tradition dictated that this role was reserved exclusively for men. There was no word for a female ruler who held absolute power. The language itself resisted the idea. But then came Hatshepsut. She was the daughter of a king, the wife of a king, and eventually the stepmother of a king. When her husband, Thutmose II, passed away, the throne was supposed to pass to his young son, Thutmose III. However, the boy was a mere child, a figurehead unable to lead a sprawling empire. Hatshepsut stepped in as regent, a common enough role for royal women. For years, she played the part of the dutiful guardian. But in the shadows of the palace, something was shifting. In the 7th year of her reign, the mask of the regent dropped, and the crown of the pharaoh was claimed. This wasn't a simple coup or a sudden grab for power. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered transformation. Hatshepsut didn't just take the power, she took the persona. Statues began to appear across the land, depicting her not as a queen, but as a king. She didn't ask for a new title. She took the ancient ones. She wore the ceremonial false beard, the heavy headdress, and the traditional kilt of a male ruler. Her body was rendered in stone with masculine musculature, her stance commanding and aggressive. To the common observer, the ruler of Egypt was a man. To the gods, she presented an even more daring narrative. She claimed she was the literal daughter of Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, who had visited her mother in the guise of her father. This divine birth story served as her shield against those who whispered of usurpation. She wasn't just ruling, she was fulfilling a celestial mandate that bypassed the limitations of gender. She was essentially telling the priesthood and the people that her blood was more than royal, it was divine. She had navigated a labyrinth of religious dogma and political intrigue to achieve what was thought impossible. She didn't just break the glass ceiling of the ancient world, she built a temple of solid limestone on top of it. For 22 years, her reign was a period of unprecedented prosperity and architectural brilliance. She didn't seek glory through the edge of a sword, but through the sails of a trade fleet. She commissioned a massive expedition to the mysterious land of Punt, bringing back myrrh trees, gold, ivory, and exotic animals. This was a triumph of logistics and diplomacy, cementing her status as a provider for her people. She built monuments that defied the engineering of the age, most notably her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. It is a structure of haunting symmetry, carved directly into the limestone cliffs. A temple of light and shadow that stands as one of the wonders of the ancient world. But as the empire flourished under her steady hand, a young man was growing up in the shadows of the court, watching a woman wear the crown that should have been his. Thutmose III, the rightful heir, was becoming a man of war and ambition, and the tension between the two must have been electric. When Hatshepsut finally vanished from the records, Thutmose III took the throne. For years, History suggests they may have coexisted, or perhaps he was simply biding his time. But the silence following her departure is chilling. Then, late in his reign, the hammers began to fall. It was a systematic campaign of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. Across the length of the Nile, the order was given, remove her. This wasn't a chaotic riot. It was a bureaucratic erasure. Workers climbed high scaffolding to reach her name on the tallest obelisks, carefully chipping away the hieroglyphs. Her statues were pulled down, their noses smashed, and their bodies broken into pieces before being buried in pits like common criminals. In some cases, her image was replaced with that of her father or her husband, effectively rewriting her achievements as theirs. The mystery that haunts historians is not just that she was erased, but why it happened so long after her death. If Thutmose III hated her, why wait 20 years to strike? Some suggest it wasn't a matter of personal vengeance, but a cold political necessity. To ensure the succession of his own son, Thutmose III might have felt the need to scrub the record of a female king who had disrupted the traditional line of male succession. By removing Hatshepsut, he restored the proper order of the gods. He wasn't just deleting a person, he was repairing a perceived fracture in the universe. He wanted future generations to believe the crown had passed directly from his father to himself, as if the woman who ruled for 2 decades had never existed at all. It was an attempt to heal the timeline by cutting her out of it entirely. For nearly 3,000 years, the plan worked perfectly. The list of kings found in later temples skipped over her name entirely. She became a ghost, a glitch in the timeline that the sands of Egypt were happy to swallow. It wasn't until the 19th century that modern archaeology began to pull back the veil. When explorers first entered her temple at Deir el-Bahari, they were confronted with a linguistic nightmare. They saw depictions of a king, but the inscriptions often used feminine pronouns. The grammar didn't match the imagery. It was a puzzle of stone and syntax that pointed toward a hidden truth. Slowly, the broken statues were unearthed from their mass graves, and the fragments of her life began to be reassembled like a giant stone jigsaw puzzle. The world began to realize that the history they knew was a fabrication. The search for Hatshepsut herself was even more elusive. In the Valley of the Kings, a small, unremarkable tomb known as KV60 held 2 mummies. One was in a coffin, the other lay on the floor, unidentified and seemingly forgotten. For decades, they were overlooked. It wasn't until 2007 that a breakthrough occurred involving a tiny wooden box inscribed with Hatshepsut's name. Inside that box was a mummified organ and a single broken molar. When researchers scanned the unidentified mummy from the floor of KV60, they found a missing tooth in its jaw. The fragment found in the box matched the socket perfectly. The Ghost King finally had a face, not the idealized masculine face of her statues, but the face of a woman who had lived, aged, and died in a world that wasn't ready for her. The dark irony of the attempt to erase her is that it may have been the very thing that preserved her story. By burying her statues and walling up her obelisks, her enemies unintentionally protected them from the elements and the passage of time. The violence of the chisel left a negative space that cried out to be explained. If she had been a minor, forgotten ruler, her monuments might have been recycled or left to crumble naturally. But because her legacy was so powerful, it required a monumental effort to destroy, and that effort left an indelible mark. The scars on the walls of her temple are a testament to her impact. You don't try that hard to forget someone who didn't matter. The very act of forgetting her became a permanent monument to her importance. As we look at the ruins of her empire today, the questions remain. What was the atmosphere in the royal court during those final years? Was there a secret war of wills between the aging queen and the rising warrior king? Or was the erasure a reluctant ritual performed by a son who respected her but feared the precedent she set? Some modern perspectives suggest that the destruction was less about hatred and more about a ritualistic tidying up of history to satisfy the demands of the priesthood and the divine order of Ma'at, which emphasized balance and tradition. Yet the precision of the damage, specifically targeting the symbols of her kingship while often leaving her images as a queen intact, suggests a very specific, pointed intent. They didn't want to kill her spirit, they wanted to kill the idea that a woman could be Pharaoh. The thriller of Hatshepsut's life is one of shadows and stone. It is a story of a woman who looked at a world built for men and decided to reshape it in her own image. She navigated a world of divine right and ancient law to achieve the impossible. And even when the hammers of history came for her, they couldn't finish the job. The silence of the desert was eventually broken by the whispers of the stones she left behind. Every time a tourist walks the terraces of her temple, the erasure fails. Every time her name is spoken in a classroom, the hammers of Thutmose III lose their power. The crime was the theft of a legacy, a heist that lasted 3 millennia, but the truth has a way of surviving in the cracks. In the end, the attempt to bury Hatshepsut only made her legend more haunting. She exists now as a reminder that history is not just what happened, but what we are told happened. It is a fragile narrative written by the winners and carved by those who hold the hammer. But the truth waits in the debris of smashed granite and the hollowed-out names of ancient walls. The woman who became king was nearly lost to the dark, but in her defiance, she became immortal. The hammers are gone, the chisels are rusted to nothing, but Hatshepsut remains, her eyes staring out from the rebuilt statues, challenging us to remember the name they tried so hard to make us forget. The air in her mortuary temple still carries a sense of that ancient tension. When the sun rises over the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, it illuminates the terraces she built, casting long shadows that seem to move with a life of their own. Visitors walk where she once walked, unaware that they are standing on the site of an ancient crime scene. By reconstructing her story, we are reversing the sentence passed upon her by the pharaohs who followed. We are undoing the work of the hammers. This is the enduring mystery of the 18th Dynasty, a period of light shadowed by a deep, dark effort to control the future by manipulating the past. It forces us to ask, how many others have been lost to the hammers? How many queens, rebels, and visionaries have had their names scraped away until only the blank stone remained? Hatshepsut's survival is a rare victory of truth over time. It is a reminder that even the most powerful empire cannot fully extinguish the light of a single determined soul. Her temple stands as a monument, not just to a god, but to the resilience of identity. As the sun sets over the Nile, the silhouettes of the obelisks she raised still pierce the sky. They are scarred, they are worn, and some are broken, but they are still there. They stand as jagged exclamation points in a story that was supposed to end in a period. The desert winds continue to shift the sands, revealing and concealing the secrets of the past. But the name of Hatshepsut is no longer a secret. It is a roar from the past, a defiance of the void. We may never know the full extent of the conflict between the woman who would be king and the man who would be her eraser. We are left with fragments, a broken tooth, a shattered face, a name chiseled into a corner where the light rarely hits. But in those fragments, we find a story more compelling than any official history. It is a dark thriller of ambition, betrayal, and the ultimate struggle for the one thing more valuable than gold or land, the right to be remembered. The sands of Egypt are deep, and they are filled with the echoes of those who were silenced. But for Hatshepsut, the silence is finally over. The king has returned, and this time, the world is listening. Every time we look at the empty cartouches where her name used to be, we aren't seeing a void. We are seeing a signature of resistance. Those empty spaces are the most powerful part of her story. They tell us that she was so significant, so transformative, that the only way to deal with her was to try to pretend she never existed. They show us the fear of those who came after her, the fear that a woman's power could redefine the very nature of the divine. In trying to delete her, they made her a permanent enigma, a puzzle that every generation of explorers feels compelled to solve. So the next time you hear of the great pharaohs, remember the one who was hidden. Remember the ruler who wore a beard of gold and a heart of iron. Remember the queen who became a king and the empire that tried to turn her back into a ghost. The struggle for her soul lasted thousands of years, but in the end, the stone spoke louder than the hammers. The truth, buried in the darkness for so long, has finally stepped into the light, proving that even the most calculated erasure cannot stop the march of a legacy that was meant to endure forever. The Nile continues to flow, the sun continues to rise, and the name Hatshepsut is once again carved into the record of human achievement. The Phantom King is a phantom no more. She is a woman, she is a ruler, and she is a reminder that no matter how hard they try to bury the truth, the earth eventually gives up its dead. Her story is a warning to all who would try to rewrite history. The stone remembers, the sand preserves, and the truth will always find its way back to the surface.